In this lesson, we're going to look at graphing a linear equation using something that we call the slope and y-intercept form of an equation. So let's look at what that equation would look like. If you look up here, we have y equals mx plus b. This is what the equation for the slope-intercept form looks like, and each letter represents something. So when you look at the x and the y right here, these are going to be the numbers for an ordered pair. The m right here stands for the slope. And if you know the slope of a line, it's going to help you to be able to graph it. And the b here at the end of the equation stands for the y-intercept. That means when you have a grid, where does it cross the y-axis? This is the y-axis. So this number right here tells you if it says plus 3, it means it crosses the y-intercept at 3. 1, 2, 3, it crosses right here. If it says -2, it crosses the y-axis at -2 down here. So that's going to tell you a point, and all you need are 2 points in order to graph a line. So this is called the slope and y-intercept form of a line. So if you look right here, if you're just identifying what is the slope, what is the y-intercept, to find the slope, you're going to look at the number that's in front of the x. It's always going to be located here in front of the x. So the slope of this line is 1/4. That means that it's rise of 1, and then you go to the right 4. The y-intercept is with a b. That's what you're going to find here at the end of the equation. It's -6. So that means that on your graph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's going to cross right here at -6, and that's a point that you can use in order to draw the line. So here we have a slope of 1/4 and a y-intercept of -6. In this one, again, when you're finding the slope, look in front of the x. So the slope is 3. 3 is the same thing as 3/1. So you're going to rise 3 and go to the right 1 to do the slope. The y-intercept is 1. You always find the y-intercept here at the end. That means on a grid right here at 1 on the y-axis, it's going to cross, so you can use that point to graph with. On this one, you notice that there's something missing. There's nothing here at the end. That means that the y-intercept is 0, and so they just don't write it there. But the slope is always found in front of the x, so it's -2, which is the same thing as -2/1. That would be going down 2 and to the right 1 from the y-intercept. The y-intercept here is just going to be 0 because it's non-existent. Now, we should be able to graph. If you have an equation in slope-intercept form, you only need 2 points to graph a line, and from these 2 things, you should be able to graph a line. First of all, you're always going to make sure that it's written in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is when the y is over on the left side by itself, and on the right side of the equal sign, we always have the x term first, and the slope is in front of it, and at the end, you're going to have your y-intercept. So it has to be in this order. First, the y on the left, after the equal sign is the x term, and then the constant is at the end. So to graph something like this, first thing you're always going to do is start with the y-intercept. You're going to start here at the end. We know that the y-intercept is a +5. So I go to my graph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here is 5 on the y-axis. We know it's going to cross here, so I can put a point there. Now from the y-axis, or from the y-intercept, this is where you're going to start from to do the slope. So from the y-intercept, we look to see that the slope is -2, which is the same thing as -2/1, which means you're going to go down 2 and to the right 1 from the y-intercept. So here's the y-intercept. We're going to go down 2 and to the right 1, and that we know there's going to be another point right there. And all you need are 2 points. Now you can take your straight edge and you can draw that line all the way across the graph with arrows on both ends through those 2 points. So with the y-intercept and the slope, you're creating 2 points so that you can graph the line. Now sometimes the equation is not in slope-intercept form to begin with, so we have to rewrite it. So to do that, you always want to look and make sure that the y is going to be on the left side. In this equation, we see that the y is already on the left side. It's in the right spot. We want the x term to be right after the equal sign. It always comes right after the equal sign on the right side. To move the negative 4x from one side to the other, you're going to do the opposite operation. So since this is a negative 4x, you're going to add 4x to both sides. So what I always say is that the equal sign is like a fence, and if a term jumps the fence, it changes the sign. It has to do that. So when we move the negative 4x to the right side of the equation, it becomes a positive 4x. Now the x term likes to be in the front of the line, and he's kind of bossy, and he tells the 2 to scoot over into his place. So the x term takes the front of the line, and he scoots the 2 over, and that leaves the y on the left side by itself. So all we did was move this one term to the other side, and when it jumps this fence right here, it changes sign. So now we have the equation in slope-intercept form. That would be y equals 4x plus 2. So what is the slope? The slope is always found in front of the x, so that would be 4 or 4 over 1. And the y-intercept is just a positive 2. That's where it's going to cross the y-intercept. So this one's on your notes. Again, we have to make sure it's in slope-intercept form first. We want the y term, here's the y term, by itself on the left side of the equation. It's already on the left side of the equation, that's good. The x term, we want to put it on the right side of the equation, so it's going to jump the fence. It's going to go from the left side to the right side, so we have to subtract 6x on both sides. Inverse operations. When you do that, that positive 6x becomes a negative 6x, and since it likes to be the first of the line, it tells the negative 9 to scoot over. So now we have 3y equals negative 6x minus 9. Now the y is not by itself yet. Y is being multiplied by 3. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So now we're going to divide all 3 terms by 3. When we do that, 3 divided by 3 is 1, so you're left with y on this side. Notice right here you have negative 6 divided by 3, which is negative 2x. And then you have negative 9 divided by 3, which is a negative 3. Now we have the equation in slope-intercept form. So you will see that the slope is negative 2, and the y-intercept is negative 3. Okay, look at this one. This time we have the y on the left side of the equation. That's good. We have the x on the right side of the equation. That's good. The only thing that's not in the right place is the y-intercept. This constant right here has to move from one side to the other. Since it's a negative 5, we are going to add 5 to both sides of the equation. When you do that, it goes to the very end because the x term likes to be in front. So all we did was take this and move it over here. When it jumps the fence, it changes sign. Now, what does this mean? We're looking at the slope and the y-intercept. What number is in front of the x? You see a negative sign, but what's the number? If there is no number there, it's an invisible 1. So that would be like a negative 1. That's a negative 1 slope. And the y-intercept is 5. Now, once you have it in slope-intercept form, you can graph it. So let's look here. We want it in y equals mx plus b format. That means we want the y on the left side by itself. Here's the y. The x term is not in the right spot. It needs to be right here in front of the negative 2. When it jumps the fence, it becomes a negative. We have to subtract 4x on both sides. So when it jumps the fence, it becomes a negative 4x. And it moved right in front of the negative 2. Now this is slope-intercept form. We have the y by itself on the left side. When graphing, we always start with the y-intercept. Here at the end, you start at the end. And we're going to put a point on negative 2 on the y-axis. Right there. Then the slope is -4, which means -4/1, which means from the y-intercept you're going to go down 4 and to the right 1. So we go down 4 to the right 1, and we put a point there. Now we can take our straight edge and draw our line all the way across the graph with the arrows on the end. 2x plus y equals 1. This one actually, if you're doing our assignment in class, it's number 10 on your assignment. With the y by itself on the left side, the x term is not in the right spot, so it's going to have to jump the fence. So when it jumps the fence, it becomes a -2x, and it tells the 1 to scoot over. So our equation is y equals -2x plus 1. When graphing, we always start with the y-intercept, and we put a point on 1 on the y-axis, which is right there. Our slope is -2, which means -2/1, which means you go down 2 and to the right 1. It looks like on my graph there I went down 3. I did. 1, 2, it should be right here. Down 2 and to the right 1. Missed my spot there. Yeah, so it should go through this spot right here. As you can tell, I went down 1, 2, 3. Need to fix that animation. Down 2 to the right 1. Okay, here's another one. We want the y by itself. So here's the y. The x term is always on the right side, right behind the equal sign. So when it jumps the fence, it becomes the opposite sign, which is a +3x, and it tells the -4 to scoot over. Next, we have to divide all 3 terms by 2 because the y is not by itself yet. When we do that, we get y equals, here's our slope, 3/2. And if we go -4 divided by 2, we see that our y-intercept is -2. So now we're ready to graph. Y equals 3/2 x minus 2. There again, we put it in the slope-intercept form. We're always going to start graphing with the y-intercept. So it crosses the y-axis at -2, so we put a point on -2. The slope is in front of the x. It's 3, 2. That means you're going to go up 3 and to the right 2 and put a point there. Now you can connect the 2 lines with a straight edge with arrows on both ends. Okay, here we want to make sure that we have the y by itself. So the x term is going to jump the fence. So that gives us 2y equals 3x. We change the sign when it jumps the fence. We tell the 4 to scoot over. We still don't have the y by itself, so we have to divide all 3 terms by 2 so that we have y equals, our slope is 3/2 x, and our y-intercept is -2. This is the same one we just did. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then we draw the line. It's on your punch line. Okay, so in review, y equals mx plus b is the slope-intercept form. The m is the slope. The b is the y-intercept. And with this, we should be able to graph it. You always start with the y-intercept. And then from the y-intercept, you rise and run with the slope, create your second point, and then you can graph your line. Graphing with slope-intercept form.